For nearly 1500 years, the vast expanses of Central America were dominated by majestic stone pyramids, intricately carved temples, and enormous cities built by the mysterious Maya people. They developed a complex writing system, skillfully conducted astronomical observations, and created a calendar that continues to amaze scientists to this day. The city of Tikal was once teeming with life. Priests strode across wide plazas, artists adorned the walls with vibrant frescoes, and rulers held grand ceremonies that gathered crowds of residents. By the early 7th century, the population had already reached about 100,000 people, and at night the city glowed with hundreds of torches. But by the end of the 9th century, a deathly silence had fallen over these same cities. The plazas became deserted, buildings crumbled, and the hieroglyphs carved into stone became covered with moss. Almost all the major cities of the southern Maya were abandoned in a very short period of time. Archaeologists find traces of haste, construction projects were abandoned, corn supplies depleted, and many sculptures damaged. Some homes show signs of famine. Animal bones disappear from the sites, and not far away, mass graves with signs of violent death are found. Written sources from that time fall silent, offering not a single clue as to what caused the mysterious collapse. Climatologists have discovered tree rings showing signs of drought that coincide with the final years of the Maya's flourishing. Reservoirs in Tikal dried up, and irrigation systems were abandoned and left broken. Brutal wars break out between cities for control over the dwindling resources. Kingdoms that were once allies unleash their armies against each other, and defensive walls rise throughout the region. The legends of the Maya descendants preserve memories of days of fire and drought, when not a drop of moisture fell on the fields, and hunger claimed the lives of entire families. One day, waking up among the ruins of once bustling cities, the Maya ventured deep into the jungle, leaving the mystery of their disappearance inscribed on stone stelae. But the explanations offered by scholars do not provide a complete answer. After all, why was such an advanced civilization unable to withstand the tests of time? From the mystery of the Maya, attention shifts to another vanished culture, which left behind even more silent ruins. Once, across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, there sprawled well-planned cities that remained unknown to anyone for thousands of years. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were true metropolises of the Bronze Age, where streets intersected at right angles, and houses had their own wells and drainage systems. The townspeople used toilets, sewage systems, and even baths on a daily basis, which was a rarity for that era. In the central squares stood granaries the size of a football field, and craftsmen worked in workshops, making jewelry from carnelian, bronze, and gold. Clay postal seals made it possible to trade with distant Mesopotamia and Egypt, while carts drawn by oxen rolled through the streets. Very little weaponry has been found in the known ruins. Apparently, violence and wars were rare here, and the inhabitants relied more on trade and craftsmanship. Around the beginning of the 2nd millennium BCE, the residential quarters suddenly became deserted. Roofs collapsed, wells silted up, and the streets became covered with a layer of dust, as if the entire population had left their homes all at once. Archaeologists have found evidence of gradual soil depletion and droughts as the waters of the Great Indus River became increasingly scarce. Marks on the clay walls indicate severe floods that destroyed neighborhoods, washing away houses and workshops. And between the houses, traces of garbage gradually accumulated, as if the residents were losing control over the city's upkeep. To this were added mysterious signs of a sudden departure. In some houses, jewelry, tools, and pottery were left behind, and many human bones were found in the city's sewers, as if people perished while trying to escape. Faced with the changing course of the river, drought, and possibly a new invasion from the west, the population of thousands of temples and homes simply vanished. Almost nothing is still known about the Harappan script. Only short symbols and drawings have been preserved on the tightly sealed seals. Why the houses, storerooms, and wells were abandoned, and where thousands of people went, remains a mystery. But as the sands of the desert began to cover the ruins of Harappa, far away on the other side of the world, other ghost islands were already appearing, destined to share a similar fate. When European sailors first landed on Easter Island in April 1722, they were astonished by the sight of the giant stone statues, known as moai, standing in a row along the coast. On an island of only about 64 square miles, there stood hundreds of these colossi, some reaching up to 35 feet in height and weighing over 80 tons. But what was even more astonishing was the near-total silence. The island's population consisted of only a few hundred people, living in modest huts among the ruins, possessing neither a large fleet nor advanced technology. Archaeological research shows that once, roughly from the 11th to the 15th century, a complex culture flourished on Rapa Nui, capable of erecting and transporting these giant statues without metals or large animals. The fields were divided by hundreds of stone enclosures for growing sweet potatoes and taro. Crops were grown in carved-out craters, and dozens of stone ahu platforms were built along the entire coastline, upon which rows of moai stood tall. However, by the 16th century, unexpected changes began to occur here. Excavations show that the forest, which once covered most of the island, had disappeared. The wood was used to build devices and to transport the statues. Dusty layers in the soil indicate severe erosion, and the discovered remains of Polynesian rats suggest that rodents quickly destroyed the seeds of local palms, preventing their regeneration. The soil became depleted, crop yields declined, and archaeologists have found evidence of widespread famine and conflict. The bones of the dead rest in rock crevices, and intentional damage has been observed on the moai themselves. The written records of the islanders, preserved as rongo-rongo, a rare system of wood carving, remain undeciphered. No one knows for certain what happened. Only oral traditions tell of internecine wars between clans and an era of moai destruction, when the statues, once objects of veneration, became symbols of decline. Some researchers believe that some of the survivors set out on rafts to other islands. Others find evidence of human sacrifices made in a desperate attempt to restore former glory. When Europeans arrived here, they found a depopulated island where fallen giants towered and remnants of a once complex system of canals and fields remained. None of the remaining inhabitants remembered how the moai were transported and erected, and the last crumbs of knowledge about the past were guarded in caves. The mystery of the disappearance of Rapa Nui's inhabitants is still shrouded in speculation, but the ruins scattered across the rocky hills serve as a reminder of the suddenness and near-total oblivion of a once remarkable culture. And yet, following this ghost island, archaeologists once again ask themselves, how could such powerful societies vanish almost without a trace, leaving behind only silent testimonies in stone, among which many secrets still remain unrevealed? When it comes to the greatness of ancient empires, it is hard not to think of Angkor Wat, hidden among the jungles of present-day Cambodia. These stone towers, rising above the humid thickets, once crowned the capital of the mighty Khmer Empire. Since the mid-12th century, temples, causeways, and complex reservoirs were built here, each one astonishing in its scale. The main gallery of Angkor Wat stretched over 1,000 feet, and its walls were entirely covered with bas-reliefs and dancing apsaras, each one unique and with its own facial expression. At dawn, stone lions guarded the wide causeways, along which crowds of pilgrims and artisans flowed. Huge irrigation canals and ponds made it possible to harvest rice even during the driest months. Inside the temples, the air was filled with the scent of incense and the prayers of priests, while in the markets, spices, silk, and weapons made from expertly forged steel were sold. By the 12th century, the population of the capital was estimated to exceed 500,000 people, more than any European city of that era. However, by the early 15th century, these streets had gradually emptied, the cobblestones became overgrown with grass, the reservoirs silted up, and the buildings began to be covered with banyan roots and layers of moss. The chronicles of Khmer scribes suddenly become sparse. They contain fleeting mentions of invasions by warlike neighbors from Siam, the destruction of dams, and widespread famines. Archaeological layers record traces of haphazard repairs. Entire temples were hastily rebuilt, and old canals were filled in instead of being cleaned. In the ruins, fragments of weapons are found, and in the temple chambers, burials showing signs of violent death. Soil studies reveal sharp fluctuations in water levels in the reservoirs. It is likely that climate changes or mistakes in irrigation management led to soil salinization and waterlogging. Next to clay vessels, archaeologists uncover charred grains of rice, a sign of crop failure and attempts to survive famine. Coins and jewelry, left behind in haste, are widespread, and on the walls of the last buildings, grim inscriptions of prayers written in panic can be found. Despite all attempts to hold onto the city, it seems the Khmers abandoned Angkor Wat gradually. First, craftsmen and merchants emigrated, then the priests left, and the temple guards were the last to remain. Hundreds of years later, travelers from France and Britain struggled through tangles of vines and roots to see this stone marvel for the first time. The ancient wells were filled with silt, bridges had collapsed under the weight of time, and the inhabitants of nearby villages no longer remembered who had built these giant temples or why. The secrets behind the disappearance of the Khmer capital remain unsolved to this day. Some scholars blame the shifting of riverbeds and the destruction of dams, while others point to wars and political chaos. But everyone agrees on one thing: Angkor Wat has become a silent monument to the demise of a once great city. And while the roots of trees continue to entwine the stone towers, yet another great civilization leaves behind only mysteries on the rocky plateaus of the Americas, where winds whistle over the silent ruins and traces of vanished people can still be seen among the crevices and steep cliffs. traces of a forgotten people in the cliffs of America. Across the Chaco Plateau, where the frozen rocks of New Mexico preserve echoes of mysterious peoples, dozens of abandoned Pueblo settlements are scattered, carved directly into the red stone. It was here that the Anasazi lived for more than 500 years, skillfully adapting to the harsh desert. Their homes were multi-storied, with hundreds of rooms and complex ventilation channels ran through the walls. In the so-called Great House of Pueblo Bonito, whose facade stretched over 450 feet, archaeologists found painted clay vessels, turquoise ornaments, and corn cobs carefully stored in stone pantries. The Anasazi built hidden trails that connected settlements across dozens of miles, and water was collected using special reservoirs where every gallon was accounted for. The settlements seemed to hide among the canyons, and the windows often faced the sunrise to catch the first rays of light. In the depths of the cliffs, mysterious ritual chambers called kivas were also found, which people descended into using narrow wooden ladders to conduct ceremonies. However, toward the end of the 12th and 13th centuries, a sense of unease began to grow on the Chaco Plateau. Excavations reveal traces of large-scale construction of defensive structures, and the edges of the cliffs are strewn with fragments of weapons and arrows. Archaeologists note a sharp decline in corn remains, and animal bones become a rarity. Signs of a hasty departure are found in the houses, broken vessels, unfinished food supplies, and children's toys left behind on clay floors. Traces of fires cover several pueblos at once. Some walls were even demolished by hand to prevent the enemy from taking shelter in the dwellings. Mysterious drawings are found on the stone walls, depictions of cats, snakes, and human figures with weapons. Studies of the tree rings of local trees show that these areas simultaneously suffered from prolonged droughts. For 80 to 90 years, there was almost no rainfall. Exhausted by poor harvests, people moved to new, more inaccessible cliffs, building fortified cave villages hundreds of feet high. Here, the walls are covered with soot from numerous fires, and at the entrances, moldy baskets with charred remnants of grain have been preserved. By the beginning of the 14th century, most settlements suddenly became deserted, as if all the inhabitants packed up and disappeared overnight. Bones found among the ruins sometimes bear cut marks. Some scholars see signs of ritual cannibalism, while others see evidence of a desperate struggle for survival. The last traces of the Anasazi lead to the south and east. Some of the descendants merged with other tribes, while others continued to build new dwellings along the rivers of Arizona and New Mexico. When explorers from Europe first arrived on these rocky plateaus, they found only empty houses, weathered altars, and faded rock paintings. Not a single written record remains about where this persistent and resourceful people went. The mystery of the Anasazi's disappearance remains unsolved to this day, compelling archaeologists to return to the labyrinths of the cliffs, where each discovery is another piece of a vast puzzle. But even among these harsh landscapes, there are legends of other, even more ancient lands that have vanished not only from the face of the earth, but from the very maps themselves. And among all the mysteries of vanished civilizations, the enigma of Atlantis holds a special place. For more than 2 millennia, this name has sparked debates, searches, and even entire expeditions. The first mention of Atlantis belongs to Plato. He claimed that beyond the Pillars of Hercules lay a vast island inhabited by a people who possessed immense wealth and advanced technologies. According to him, the inhabitants of Atlantis built palaces and temples from red, black, and white stone, adorned the walls with copper and gold, and hundreds of ships and war chariots stood in the ports. The island's fields yielded harvests twice a year, and wide canals were filled with the purest water from the mountains. But, according to ancient tales, the arrogance and greed of the inhabitants led to their downfall. In a single terrible night, the island sank into the depths of the sea, forever hiding the traces of a flourishing civilization. Since then, traces of Atlantis have been sought all over the world, in the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Spain, at the bottom of the Caribbean Sea, and even in the deserts of the Sahara. In the 19th century, theories emerged about sunken cities in the Bahamas. In the 20th century, expeditions explored mysterious ruins in the Mediterranean, and at the beginning of the 21st century, sonar detected anomalies on the floor of the Atlantic that resembled huge rectangles. Some researchers point to the ancient cities of the Minoan civilization on Crete. Excavations in Knossos and Phaistos uncovered palaces similar to Plato's descriptions, and a volcano on the island of Santorini once destroyed an entire settlement, covering it with a thick layer of ash. This catastrophe is dated to the middle of the 2nd millennium BC and is known for its devastating tsunamis. Other theories refer to mysterious structures on the seabed off the coast of Cuba. Photos and videos show regular geometric blocks, but no expedition has provided evidence for the existence of the Great Atlantis. Despite this, the idea of a vanished continent continues to captivate minds, especially as modern archaeologists discover sunken cities submerged by the rising ocean levels. Ancient myths from the peoples of America, Europe, and Africa contain similar stories about a land that disappeared underwater in an instant and entire peoples swept away by catastrophe. And while scientists continue to debate whether the island of the Atlanteans was a fabrication, a warning, or a real place, the legend itself keeps inspiring searches and new discoveries. It is unknown whether proof of Atlantis' existence will ever be found, but its story, like a shadow, slips between the lines of ancient texts and motivates new generations not only to explore the past, but also to pay close attention to the signals that nature and history leave around us. It is here that the search for the main lessons to be learned from the disappearance of once great civilizations begins. As archaeologists uncover the details of the mysterious disappearances of Atlantis, the Maya, the Anasazi, and the Harappans, something troubling emerges on the surface, recurring scenarios that the modern world can easily underestimate. Ancient metropolises built complex water supply systems, relied on monoculture agriculture, and constructed intricate networks of roads and canals. When years of drought came, as in the Maya jungles or on the Chaco Plateau, the entire chain would collapse at once. Hundreds of thousands of people were left without access to water or food, and cities quickly emptied, leaving behind only hastily abandoned homes and depleted fields. Such collapses rarely happened suddenly. In the Indus Valley, the soils were first depleted due to the shifting of the Indus River, which made the usual water source inaccessible, and garbage began to accumulate in the streets. People left the cities not because they failed to notice the impending disaster, but because they could not react quickly enough to the chain of changes. In Angkor Wat, in the last decades before its abandonment, the Khmer frantically repaired dams and filled in old canals, desperately trying to regain control over the crumbling infrastructure. But climatic shifts and wars proved to be stronger. On Rapa Nui, the inhabitants depleted the island so thoroughly, cutting down almost every patch of forest, that by the time drought and a rat infestation struck, there were no resources left to restore the ecosystem. Conflicts over the last surviving fields, as on Easter Island, and mass migrations, as with the Anasazi, were accompanied not only by struggles for survival, but also by the loss of cultural knowledge. The Rongorongo script vanished into oblivion, and the secrets of irrigation disappeared along with the masters who knew them. Analysis of debris, food remains, and inscriptions on stones reveal similar patterns. There is a sharp increase in the number of bones showing signs of violence, the destruction of irrigation systems, and a rise in mass burials. Archaeologists record evidence of entire peoples migrating as the remnants of once powerful empires dissolve among neighboring cultures, and most unique knowledge disappears forever. Modern researchers use data from tree ring dating, satellite imagery, and chemical soil analysis to show that a single disrupted link, whether water, crops, climate, or trade, is enough for a vast system to begin collapsing like an avalanche. But what's important is that most of these civilizations, at the height of their development, considered themselves invulnerable and, even in their final decades, continued to build lavish temples, road networks, and new palaces. As we conclude our journey through vanished worlds, it becomes clear that behind the stone ruins, silent walls, and mysteries of sunken cities lie very real warnings. Success and prosperity do not make a culture immortal, and its weaknesses become apparent too late, when the way back is already cut off. It's clear that the lessons of these catastrophes do not belong to the past alone. They are etched into every abandoned city, where between the walls you can still hear the faint echo of those who failed to save their world.